during the 1980s, especially 1980, when the boycott started, there was a lot of time that we had on hand because we didn't go to school. So I found myself during that year going places where I was not supposed to go, meeting up with people that I was not supposed to meet up if I were in school. And there was one particular war that actually happened in Cape Town that actually caused my friend to withdraw from gangsterism, which pushed me to the front. And I think that also played a major role in how my reputation increased in Cape Town. And at that time, it was at that time that I started the gang in Bonteheuwel, in my hometown. And so by starting the gang, I became their leader for many, many years, And sometimes, in the underworld in Cape Town, you do one thing and it projects your reputation sky high, sometimes unwittingly, sometimes unconsciously. But that's unfortunately what happened to me.
Growing up as an ordinary young boy there in Bonteheuwel, and there's my father. I didn't actually know all of his goings and his doings, and and eventually at the end of the day, I managed to get some things in the ear, and I was going to do some follow-up. Yeah, so as a young boy, I already started doing research on my father's life, because in those days, gangsters was like very professional. They knew how to carry themselves, whether it be in work, whether it be in family. A gangster looked like the family man. You couldn't tell a gangster from a family man back then, like in these days. So for me it was like my dad had his private life, his family life, and there was this private life at the side, the gangster life, which I never knew anything about, but I wanted to know, what is that? What is going on the other side? Because why? There was this resentment, there was always animosity that I could have sensed from other people, coming towards me as a young man, not having trouble with anyone, or not having a fallout with anyone, or not looking for trouble. But it was always this trouble was always coming to look for me, and I was like, what is it? And I was like going deeper into my father's life, and I eventually discovered that he was actually part of the gang. Yeah, he was actually part of the American gang, and he also was one of the founders. And that was why this dark cloud was like hanging over us, yeah, as a family.
When I was born, my mom was 15 years old, so way too young to raise a child. And I know at that stage it was almost like a shame to the family. It's like she's on school, getting pregnant, and then my grandmother took me in since I was a baby, and I grew up with my grandmother, and she had 13 children from 3 different marriages, and so it was all aunts and uncles, and some was younger than me, some was older than me. So I grew basically up as my grandmother's son, one of her children, and obviously in that household, her last husband was very just protective over his children, and so there was a lot of rejection that the rest of us felt, me and my other uncles and aunts, and so one by one we were kind of like cast out of the house. And so I never felt like that I belonged in that house. I never felt like I'm part of this. And there was always this deep yearning and this cry inside of me. Why don't my mom and my dad come and rescue me? Why don't they come and fetch me? Why can't I go live with them? And eventually I started to go look for that on the streets. So since the age of, 9 years old, I was starting to hang around on the street corners, hang around with gangs, and I basically started now to grow up with them. And I officially joined the gang, I know by the age of 13 years old, I officially joined the gang and got tattooed up, and so yeah, that was sort of my journey of how I ended up in the gangs.
I could have never got involved whilst my father was still able-bodied. I could have never got involved in gangsterism while he could have still walked. If he had still his movement, I would have never been in the gangs. Because why? That was an order he gave everywhere. They saw me near to the centers, near to gang turfs, near to my father's friends, who, no matter who it was, they would like, either they would pick me up or load me into the car or the bakkie and would drop me off at home again, or they will like chase me with a serious warning back home. This is not for you. This stuff is not for you. So that was my father's way of keeping me away from gangsterism. So yeah, so only after my father had the accident, it was like I snapped.
Spent 6 months rehabilitation in Conradi Hospital in Pinelands, and then was discharged in March of 1991. Our marriage broke up soon after that. I believe we were still very young and there wasn't a lot of assistance like there is today. So a year after that, 4 months after that, we separated.
It was almost like the score that broke, you know, in my life. The score that had me like a safe net that I was in, and this net was like ripped apart. And from there, sure, other stuff got a hold of my life, and so I got more exposed and more exposed into this realm of gangsterism and the cult of gangs in the Cape Flats as a young boy.
They had to grow up essentially without a father. They became visitors in my life, the two of them. I'm not sure, but I could only say that maybe that was one of the factors. Another thing that may play a role was the fact that nobody could actually fill my role properly. And this is said with a lot of sensitivity in Bonteheuwel.
We obviously knew Taswell Senior because he was at the time the gang leader of the Americans, of the American gang. I was part of the junior Cisco Yakkers, or the JCYs. Was very popular back in the 60s and 70s as only the Cisco Yakkers in the Athlone, Cape Town area. But later we kind of like took it on, and we kind of like as youngsters ran with it within the Athlone area. So now we're all from Bonteheuwel, and so we now the school gang, and we wear the nice clothes because we're all a group of youngsters, goes to the clubs, and so it attracts other youngsters. They want to be part of this, and not like, because Taswell Senior was part of like an old gang, and they were like, so his kids were obviously now interested in us. And I can remember this one day, bit of a rainy day or something, and he was just, we saw this kid following us the whole time wherever we were walking, and so I looked and I realized, but this was Taswell Senior's son.
It looked nice, that gang from the outside. It looked like it was the new kid on the block that time, and as a youngster you wanted to fit in, because why, there was always that sense of belonging. You know, I needed to belong somewhere, and now with my father in this gang that I have no place in, because why, of his principles, that I cannot become a gangster. I needed to belong somewhere, as every kid on the Cape Flats, you know, have that sense of belonging. Every kid that either grows up with a father or without a father, they have that sense of belonging. So I thought I needed to go and join this gang with Mario, but the same thing happened.
So he actually came up to us and he says, but I want to be part of your gang, and I want to join you, and I want to have a tattoo and everything. So for us it's a fear, not a fear factor, but it's like red lights going on. We know your dad is our enemy, because at the time we were actually at war with the American gang. And so we think if he joins our gang, he could tell everything to his dad. No, they're hanging out there, or they're doing this, or they're planning that. And so I said, no, and he just kept on coming and walking behind us and stuff like that. So I just got a big stick and I gave him like one or two hits with a stick.
Yo, he roused up a lot of anger, anger that I wasn't able to express at that specific time because I wasn't at that level that guy was on now in gangster terms like, and but it was an anger that I harvested on the inside of me without them even knowing it. I harvested that anger like you chased me away while I was just looking for a place to fit in, you know, and yeah, it brought a lot of anger up in me and resentment towards him. Yeah, and these guys that was part of this gang.
He ran and he went to go fetch his dad's friends, all the big Americans and stuff like that. So they came and we were there, and it broke out into a big gang fight at that area, and there was some shootings happening and some knife stabbing and stuff like that. And so that's when they said to him, now you must join our gang. So then that day, he became part of his dad's gang.
Yeah, I was about 15 years old when I officially joined the gangs, yes. It wasn't for me like something new or a shock. I knew exactly how to behave and how to do and how to go about. But it all was just an act. To me, it was like just one big act, a big act that I had to put on. But really, there was a mask. That was a mask. But behind that mask was there only just a young boy, broken young boy that was lost, that didn't see any way out but to go these ways of their fathers, you know, and the ways they have walked in.
For the 2 years that I was married, I wasn't really involved in high-level gangsterism. But when I went back, I just went back to the thing that I know. And so went drinking again and partying. One night, me and one of the guys, we wanted to go and drink 2 beers. And so as we crossed the shopping center, someone informed us that the Americans had shot one of the junior Siskoyakis.
We were at war with the American gang, and there was a ceasefire that we are not allowed to shoot each other during that time. And there were two twin brothers that lived close to Taswell's area where his gang was controlling. And then one of those guys, he was getting into a taxi, and his boys saw him, and they shot him. So this is one of my gang brothers now, and they shot him, and they broke that treaty at the time. And that's where we decided we're gonna go straight up and take Taswell out, because he's the leader of the gang, because that order might have came from him to, if you see any one of them, you kill them. And so this boy was shot through the stomach, and he was rushed to the hospital, and immediately we were fired up.
I knew that I had to turn around, because the thing with the junior Siskoyakis was they always come back. They never leave a thing like that.
And so we got 2 guns, and I know that day we were waiting for him for 2 hours to come home, and we were standing right opposite his house, standing and waiting there, waiting. And finally the cars pulled up, and he had his bodyguards and everything.
And as we just was about to enter into our yard, they said the 2 of them came over from the telephone booths, and they fired off a shot.
As he walked into his house, they were pushing him in his wheelchair. We came right up at the back of them and started shooting.
And they shot Marcelino through his left side. Just one shot, I heard. Marcelino ran into the house holding his side, but the bullet went straight through.
I think the 2 guns we had was a 9mm sword and a 357. That's the 2 guns we had. And we fired out, I think one magazine takes about 9 and the other one about 13, something like that. And we shot all the bullets. I think the one gun was 4 bullets left to kind of like protect us on our way home. And yeah, we came right up at the back of him. We were like a couple of feet, and we started shooting at him. And they were running, lifting up his wheelchair, trying to get him into the house. And while they were in the house, we were still shooting at them. And then we ran out and made our way home.
My friends carried me up by the stairs, put me in bed. Some of the friends that heard the shot came over, helped me, and then some of them went down to fold the wheelchair up, and they came running up again, and they asked me, "Are you sure you're not wounded? Because there's a bullet hole in your wheelchair." And they turned me left, right, and center to see if there's a wound in my body, but there was no wound in my body. But they couldn't understand because they saw the bullet wound in the wheelchair.
Yeah, I was very surprised later on when we actually found out that he didn't die, because we were so close, and I mean the number of bullets we shot at him, it's just like a close range. And we actually went home and drinking and celebrating, and no, we took out the main man that day. And yeah, that's how when we kind of like found out later, it was kind of like almost like a disappointment that we didn't do the job properly.
Afterwards, yeah, things were a little bit rough in Bonteheuwel because of that shooting. A lot of people were not satisfied that they would have the guts to shoot at a man in a wheelchair. But then we heard who it was. Obviously, it was the junior Siskoriakis. I knew the name of the one whose name was Taman. I knew his name, but I never knew the identity of the other shooter for all those time.
I got information that time, because there's no secrets. You always get to the bottom of things, that Mario was also involved, and that was even bringing more anger by me to say, now we must kill these guys, man. Whether it be in a prison or whether it be where. I don't have a life outside. I can't wait outside. So I was always on the lookout for these guys. It's almost I was like praying them to prison. I was like praying them to prison, let them come, because I know they're afraid for that place. They're afraid they are what they are on the streets, but when they come there, you have to actually face yourself, and you actually have to face the music when you come to prison. Then that is a whole another ball game. So, yeah, Mario. Oh, I hated that guy with a passion.
And I realized that being shot at and not come away with no wound can surely be the hand of God. I mean, I was unsaved at the time, but I was raised up in a house where my mom was a Christian, and my elder sister was a Christian. So I understood Christian dynamics, kingdom dynamics. And after the shooting, I actually stayed indoors for about 3 months, because we were now on high alert in case something like that is going to be attempted again. Then I began to realize that the Lord was speaking to me. I now know these things will not happen to me if God wasn't speaking to me, because these are extreme things, And so I remember the week before I gave my heart to Jesus, I decided, I made a conscious decision that I'm going to make a change. The Lord is speaking to me. I didn't tell my mom, but one Tuesday on the 10th of April, as the ministers, the pastors, they go around giving Holy Communion to those who were unable to come to church on a regular basis. So the Methodist Church, I was still there at the Methodist Church, and our Reverend came to serve me with Holy Communion. And when he served me with Holy Communion, I said to him that I want to give my heart to Jesus. And he was shocked. My mom's tears just rolled down her cheeks because she, of all people, knows where I come from. And that was like almost 22 years ago.
After my basic training, I was appointed. My first command area was Portsmouth, but after Portsmouth, I was like reshuffled to go and work at other prisons. But Portsmouth is my station where I start and where I end my career. So, the first time when I entered Portsmouth, I was afraid. I was truly afraid because they sent me to maximum prison. So maximum prison is where you have all this hardcore crime prisoners. So I remember the first day when I entered, we were close to 50 new recruitments. So we entered the prison, and this warrant officer, Mr. Malgas, was introducing us now to the colleagues that works on the section. And as we passed through the passage, I see this faces, written on tattoos. And I read some of that, and it's vulgar language is being written on the faces of these prisoners. And I was afraid because some of them make remarks. And the remarks they make is like they call us, "Hi girls, how are you doing?" And we are warders and we have to work with them. And they call us girls. So I think, this is a challenge. So yes, after we go through our induction at Portsmouth, at maximum, now we get appointed to the sections. So my first section where I start working at Portsmouth prison was maximum A section. A section is for hardcore criminals. Your maximum sentence that inmates have there is up to 55 till 70 years. So which means they lost it all over themselves, and prison becomes their home.
I remember this day when I first got into Portsmouth prison, and I saw all this cages, this massive cages, and this cages was packed full of people, and everyone was screaming and banging the gates, and it looked to me like a human zoo. I was scared, I was terrified, I didn't know what to expect. And obviously, because I was one of the last of my friends that was captured by the police, I know some of them are here and they are already part of the prison gang system, and I know there's be a little bit of security, but I was freaked out at the beginning and where I found myself in.
I met Mario while he was a child. He was 16, 17 years old. That also include Taswell. They were children. And when I met Mario, his alias, what we call is his nickname, was Katu, killer.
And in prison, because I was very small and thin, I had to stab people and get involved in fights so that people can see, no, this boy's not to be messed with and stuff like that. So that was my journey in prison, trying to put up this facade of I'm strong, I can defend myself, I'm not going to be bullied or raped or whatever, all the stuff that's happening in the prison.
Mario was not an easy inmate. Mario was giving also instructions to his fellow inmates to stab members. He was not an easy inmate. So my journey with Mario was not easy as well. because he have that mind and mentality that he can rule my prison. And when I met with Mario, very quiet prisoner, good personality, but he was a problem. So Mario gets so involved in this gang. They call themselves the 26. He totally lost himself in his human being, that he was loving and he was prepared to die for this gang.
That we're sitting with the three main gangs that are running the prison systems, which are the 26s, the 27s, and the 28s. And you will see the tattoos, like you'll see here on my here on my arm is a tattoo of a 26. Here on my shoulder is a tattoo of the 27. And because the 26s and the 27s would come together or bind up or would stand together, and the 28 would mostly be separated from them.
The 26 gangs, they believe in money. So, okay, let me go in detail. They believe in money. So what? How will you get money in prison? You will only get money in prison if you become a businessman in the prison and you become smuggling. So the 26 gangs are known, they smuggle. And they work hand in hand with the warders.
So I had a couple of wardens that was bringing me stuff and drugs and stuff like that. And obviously some of them, their lives are at risk, their families' lives are at risk, and they are at a place of fear, and others are plainly because they are greedy. They want more money, they want more alcohol, they want more drugs, stuff like that. And that's how they kind of like get into this web where they can't get out anymore. Then they have to do it up until they either get caught one day or up until they move to another prison.
The 27 gang, they are, as we call it, they are not the generals. They are the rule. They rule. They give instructions. They decide what 26 and 28 must do. If they decide today the head of the prison must be stabbed by Friday the head of the prison will be stabbed. Because he's the Hollander, hulle sê he's die wetslaner. So at the end of the day, what he say is law. Because he's the foundation layer in prison. He's like the foundation layer. He initiate, he decide, he make decisions. That's why they called him, he's a man of blood. He's a man of blood. He believed blood must flow in prison. Members must be stabbed. Fellow inmates must be stabbed and killed. It comes from him that called himself 27 gang. They are very, very evil. 28s, they believe they must work in the kitchen. They call it the Carlton in their tongue. And the other thing is they also believe in blood, in money. But they stand for what we call the sodomize fellow inmates. And that two things I dealt and I deal with it very severe and serious. Because just believe, just think for ourselves that inmate 28 believed that he can have intimacy with another man. And I see in my years when an inmate was sodomized by these gangs, the 28s, that inmate lost his dignity, integrity, character, personality, all this. And that is how they become, as we call it, morphis. Then now they become like girls. In the tongue of the number, they call it molivas. So that same liking now, give him as a lady, as a woman for the gang of 28.
Rape is almost legal in prison. Because when that gates and doors lock, there's no one to protect you. And they might throw you into a cell with 50 guys. There's no way you can stand up for yourself or cover yourself or whatever. And so you get raped, and after you get raped, you now feel the need and you must join that same gang. And I've seen this with some of the guys that I've met and known, and then they come out of prison and then there's this big macho man because they were in jail. But then this thing happened to them while they was there. And so now they have to cover that up with even more anger and more pain towards other people, and they become even more violent than what they were when they go inside of prison, because they're walking around with this thing that happened to them when they ended up there. And a lot of guys also, their families reject them because they end up in prison. And they before they went, they joined gangs because of family issues, because families were absent, and then they go to prison, and when they come outside of prison, then the family writes them off. Now you're a gangster, you have tattoos in your face, you have tattoos on your arms, and now they have no one. And some of these kids and some of these boys even end up on the streets. And so I said there's a lot of these stories of hurt and pain that these guys are going through. It's like there's that saying that says hurting people hurts other people. And so when I was hurt, or when I get hurt in jail or through life, then I want to do the same to the next person. And that's where the guys end up in this vicious cycle.
I met Taswell in the same prison where Mario was. Mario was before Taswell in prison. Taswell come after.
Yeah, I got sentenced 73 years they gave me. As a young boy, they wanted to actually to let me rot in prison, to put it to you like that. They actually reduced that sentence because I was still a youngster at the time, 16, 17 years old. They put the other half of the sentence, 30-something years, into the 42 years. So that is what I walked away with, back to prison, effective 42 years, not knowing when I will be released. They just give you that package and dump you there by the dumping site with the name of prison, and there you have to find, yeah, your way now.
Before he came to prison, I was already in prison. So I was already a gangster, prison gangster. And so there was this thing, because some of the people that he killed was my old friends, or people that belonged to the same gang. So then there was this hit upon his life that when we get you, we're going to stab you and kill you in prison. So the wardens knew about it, everyone knew about it, so they had to put him in another unit.
And I give the instruction clear to the members that they must keep Mario and Taswell away from each other. And there starts my journey, where I intervene on a daily basis with Taswell and with Mario.
He was a warden, Mr. Dreyer. I know I'm going to meet him still one day, if he's still alive. That guy, he asked me that day, "Who are you?" I said, "No, Chief, who am I? What does the card say? You almost got the card to say who am I." But that day he didn't mean who I was, like my name. He wanted to know who am I in the underworld, because of what is happening now here. All of these people that is coming, they're coming for you. So I said, no. But I actually lied, because why? We can't have the truth for the warden.
Then I decide we have to remove one of them. And the first person that we removed to Drakenstein prison, that years we call it Victor Verster, was Taswell. And then after that, I didn't see Taswell anymore.
And from there, they had to send him away as soon as he got sentenced to a prison, to Drakenstein prison, away from me.
Yeah, now they sent me a little bit deeper, further prisons where there's real gangs, real prison gangs, and I actually joined the prison gang also, because why? What am I going to do? I got this life now behind bars, and now all I got in my mind, I need to survive, and I need to adapt to this life. behind bars. So can't beat them. As the saying goes, you must join them.
It was sad when I heard that he got sentenced, because I wasn't in court when he got sentenced. I was in hospital. It was sad for me because it's not something that any father wants for his son.
So what happened to me at Paulsmith prison, because I was now going up in the ranks, and I was now in charge of a group of other 26 gangsters in my cell, and I can remember this one evening, and we had a party in our room, and we had a little braai in our cell, and there was drugs and everything, and in the other room there was one of the other gang members, friends of mine, and he was asking me for a knife. And so my knife was the only one that's always available. And I said to the other guys, go take my knife out of my locker and go send it to that guy. And they sent the knife to him, but unknowingly that he was busy robbing the guys in my room, because they go to court, and when they go to court they go into one cell, and from that cell they are being put into the cells. So then he was busy robbing the guys that were part of the 28 gang in my room. And so now obviously these guys in my room, they're thinking, but you gave the knife for it to be done. And so it created a whole commotion, and that day the 28 gang in my room, they were planning to kill us, to murder me. So they had all these connections at the kitchen, so they got all the kitchen knives and stuff in the cell. And I'm sitting there because your 26 gang are always outnumbered against the 28 gang, because they're always more in number. So they were about 40, 50 guys on their side. We were about 12 guys on our side. And so now I'm seeing everything is happening, and this is something now that they feel we can't correct with a number by fixing it, and there has to be blood. So I said, no, okay, it's fine. So now I'm sending out a message to my other gangs in the rest of the prison, send me your knives, because obviously my knives were caught when the police raided the cell. They took my knives. So now I'm asking the guy, send me all your knives, to now arm this 26 members against this almost 50, 28 guys. So I got the knife, and I obviously took the biggest one, and I said, if we're not going to start a fight before the lockup, we're all going to be dead. And so that was sort of now my plan to the rest of these guys. They were most of them were a little bit younger than me and small, and I look at these guys and I say, they're going to be killed tonight. And so obviously I felt the responsibility as the leader to act. And so I started, when the wardens were starting the counting, I started to stand up, got in, and as these guys came into the cell, I started stabbing them. And obviously the main guy that was now, he was going to give the command for these 28s to stab us and to kill. So he was the one that I stabbed and actually cut his heart in 2 pieces, right from the front to the back. And so there was blood everywhere. And these 2 wardens went and they locked themselves up in the office up until we were done stabbing and stuff like that. And then all the other crew came in.
I instructed the warders to remove Mario from the cell and put him in the middle of the courtyard, because I want to set an example so that the fellow inmates, they must see what happened with him can happen to them.
They took me out into the middle of the courtyard. So now we have cells on this side, cells. All the people can see me. So while all my friends are standing there with their hands behind their heads on their knees, they took me separately, put me in the middle of the courtyard. And obviously they wanted to make an example or a statement. And so while my hands was tied behind my head, they broke 2 of my ribs, and they broke my nose. One of the wardens kicked me in my face a couple of times and broke my nose. And while they were beating me, my arms, my legs, everything, so that I couldn't walk.
I was part of that. We beat him to hell. We beat him. His ribs was broken, fractured, his chest. Blood was coming from his mouth, from his nose, even from his ears. Blood was flowing. And I instructed not to stop. I want to see. There's no more movement. There's no more, he breathed in and breathed out.
They took me and they threw me into a burned out prison cell. And there I laid so that they actually left me to die. And I know the one warden would come every morning, would come to my cell, and he would take his knife out of his pocket and he would put it at my cell gate, and he said, "Take the knife. Because I know if I take the knife, they will come in again and they will beat me again." So he would just put his knife there every day, just take the knife. And after 3 days and 3 nights, I know these 2 other inmates, they came to me and they brought me this big Bible. And they says, no, they gave me all the scriptures. I was just looking at them like this. I couldn't even remember what they were talking about. And says, just read this Bible. And I took the Bible and I threw the Bible under the bed. Because for me, I was angry at God. I had such a anger against God, because I said, if there was a God, why did He allow me to grow up the way I grew up and to experience the pain that I experienced? And why did He leave me to abandon me on the streets of Cape Town to live the life I lived? So there was a hatred against God, and there was a hatred against my own mom and my dad. And so I wanted nothing to do with God. And that's very same night, because I couldn't lay flat on my back because my ribs was piercing in my lungs. And that day, while I was sitting and sleeping, I felt I couldn't breathe anymore, because my body went over like this and the ribs went into my lungs and I couldn't breathe. And I was struggling to breathe. I couldn't call the wardens. I couldn't call no one. And what seemed to me like this is my last breath and I'm going to die tonight in my prison cell, I cried out to God, if there is a God, please save me. And I can remember that small cell, it was in the middle of the night, and there's that small light in our room, and rays of sunlight poured out into my cell. And I was thinking, I'm busy imagining, because I smuggled drugs, I smoked drugs, I smuggled alcohol in prison when I wanted to drink alcohol in prison. And I just put my hand and I'm thinking I'm busy hallucinating stuff. But the light kept pouring. It was like this rays of sunlight into my room, even brighter than the day. And so as it dimmed back to normal, I started speaking in tongues. I started quoting scriptures. And so now I'm asking myself in my mind, where are you getting all the stuff that you're talking about? What are you talking about? So I'm having this reasoning in my head while having this word vomit of scriptures and stuff coming out of my mouth. And then I didn't know what was happening, but the Bible says when the Spirit of God comes over you and you don't know what to pray for, the Spirit of God will intercede on your behalf. And I believe that was happening with me at the time. But I had no control over my body, no control over my mouth. It went out, I don't know, 20 minutes, 2 hours. I don't know, I couldn't keep track of time. But finally I got control over my mouth, and I felt inside of me, go take out that Bible under the bed which you chucked out there. So now I'm on my knees crawling, because the bed, we slept on metal beds, and the bed is welded into the ground. So I'm lifting up the bed, crawling under the bed, taking out the Bible. When I got back out of I realized that this is the first time in 3 days and 3 nights you could actually bend over. And I'm checking myself and I'm doing this with my body, bending over, touching my toes, totally healed from 2 broken ribs. There was no one in my cell. I didn't see a doctor. There was nobody. And in the middle of the night, when you look at the window, you kind of like see your own reflection. It's like a mirror. And I knew my nose was standing skew because it was broken. And I looked at the mirror. My nose, this part was still swollen, but it was straight. The ribs were, it was just a bruise, a blue mark on my side, but the ribs were healed. And I just felt, oh, good, something happened, but I didn't think much of it. And then I opened up the Bible randomly. I didn't know where to start reading. I forgot all the scriptures these guys gave me. I closed my eyes and put my finger randomly on the page. And when I opened my eyes, it was in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 1 and 2. And I read that scriptures. And it says, O Israel, if you will repent and return unto the Lord, and if you will put away your abominations out of my sight, and then nations will come to my light. But in that place where stands, O Israel, I saw my name standing in the Bible in capital letters. And the scripture read, O Mario, if you will repent and put away your abominations out of my sight and declare that the Lord lives, and the nations will come to my light. And I'm thinking, this is the first time I hear about the Mario in the Bible. I closed the Bible, closed my eyes, opened the Bible randomly, put my finger on the page, and when I opened my eyes, it was Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, and my name was still standing in the Bible. And I thought, this is probably a coincidence. I closed the Bible. I did that for 5 or 6 times. And every time I opened up the Bible, my name was in the Bible. If you will repent and put away your abominations out of my sight and declare that the Lord lives, the nations will come to my light. And it was at that moment that I felt that there is someone bigger than me in my room. Someone I can't see, I can't touch, but I know he's here in my room. Bigger than my reputation, bigger than all the stuff that I've done. He's in my room, and that's where I got this holy fear for God at that moment. Such a fear that I took the Bible, threw it back under the bed, and I went to go sleep. But it was the first time in 3 days and 3 nights that I could actually lay flat on my back and actually slept the whole night through up until the next morning. So the 2 gentlemen that brought me the Bible, because I was not allowed to mix with any other inmates because I was classified as a maximum inmate because of my violent behavior. And so these 2 guys, they were working in the prison, so they have to bring the food. So I get my food chucked under my gate and my cup of coffee, and then when I'm done I must give it back. Not like the other inmates could go and fetch their food and go eat in the courtyard and stuff like that. I must eat in my cell. So the next morning these 2 guys comes to my cell. I says, guys, I had something happen to me last night. So now I'm telling them the story, and their eyes was like this. And they said, do you know what happened to you? It was like Paul on the road of Damascus. I was like, who's Paul? And so they went away, and they told the guy that is giving them Bible studies, that's now my mentor and spiritual father as well. And they went in the cold to go tell him. So a couple of days later, I see this big old white guy standing in front of my cell. And he was just looking at me like this. So I'm checking him out, because obviously I grew up with a bit of a hatred against the white people, feeling robbed and stuff like that. So I'm looking at him like this. What do you want? He just stared at me, and he looked at me. And even today he will tell people the story of how I looked him up and down from his feet to his face. And he just nodded his head, almost like God has a plan for you and you have no clue. A day later he came back again, and he came back again, and he came back again. So he eventually asked me the question, don't you want to get baptized? It's like, baptized? And so I said yes. So he started sharing me the story of baptism and all that stuff. And I said, yes, I want to show the whole world I'm not a gangster anymore. I'm a changed man. I'm a man of God. So he says, no, it's fine. He organized with the chaplain. Is it possible that I can bring in a special baptism bath? And the chaplain said yes. So then he comes and he puts up this bathtub, filled it with water in the middle of the courtyard. And all these other guys, 28s, 26s, 27s, they were all standing at their windows looking through this grill, looking at me. And here I am getting baptized in this water. And all my enemies are looking at me like this, screaming through the windows, this is nothing. You think you're a Christian now, and we're going to get back to you, and stuff like that. And I got back, and I just felt, when I got up out of the water, I just felt so free. I said, irrespective, I have all these tattoos on my body and what people are saying and screaming, I'm free. For me, I still see the picture. I was very skinny and thin at the time. I must send you the picture. I must go look where it is. And I came out of this water feeling free. So yeah, it was a very special day for me that day. Even so much more that when I started leading people to the Lord when I was in prison, I started baptizing them in the prison, in fish ponds, in toilets. I started baptizing them. So yeah, so it was a very, very impactful, and it was a testimony for me to the rest of Portsmouth prison. I'm no longer the same.
After that, Mario was coming back, and I don't interact with him anymore. I just pass by, look at him, and he was quiet. And I think that was the time God is busy dealing with him. But what I did was right if it comes to the law and the regulations of the Department of Correctional Services. But from a human being perspective, I felt it after we beat him as an inmate to death, leave him in his blood, throw him in a cell, don't care what's going to happen with him, turn my back and walk away, was not that easy, because you have a subconscious. And it triggered me. I couldn't sleep. And God was also busy with me, telling me that my behavior is unaccepted as a believer.
I heard Mario got saved, yeah, and that news didn't strike me also good. That was devastating news to me. Yeah, maybe to the guys that was saved it was something good, but not to me, because of the plans that we had with this guy. Because by him now in this picture of being saved and we attempting to take his life is not going to look good on us. But still, I went ahead with the plans to say, guys, we must find out, is this guy really saved? Is this guy really converted? Is that a real change? Or is it only a temporary thing to get away, like a lot of them, to get away from the gang life, or from their responsibility, that they have, because why they owe.
Because I was part of the leadership as a prison gangster, and I hurt a lot of people while I was in prison. I almost killed people while I was in prison, and there was a lot of hatred towards me. And when I did become a Christian, there were so many attempts on my life to kill me. Some people swore at me, some people said, we're going to murder you, we're going to kill you, and I just said, no, it's fine. If I die for Christ. You can do with me what you want for me. I'm not going to fight back. It's not like in the past. If you're going to come for me, I'm going to get you. I said, no, I'm laying everything down. If you come for me, I'm not going to even smack you back. It's fine. And that was basically my stance. And God would send me back into the cells of the people that I've hurt to go and preach the gospel to them. And while I was doing that, they were planning to stab me.
A couple months after that, I transferred Mario to Drakenstein prison. And from there, I never see him again.
So here I come at Drakenstein prison now. I'm saved. I don't worry. Taswell is still a gangster, and a lot of these other kids that are beaten up are all now gangsters and 27s and all the stuff. So now they're coming together and says, but here's this guy. Now we're going to show him. And so that was their planning from the get-go. And I knew it. And like I said, I knew I was either going to get stabbed or killed in prison. But it's okay. If I do get stabbed, it's for the glory of God. It's because I'm serving the Lord. I can't protect myself now. I can't stab them back.
There's a saying that say there's a gate for into the gang, especially the gang for 26, but there's no gate out. The gate out is dead. You see, so now this responsibility was now coming upon me. This guy, because while we were at the time we were ruling that prison, this guy must die. So how do we take the life of the guy that is now saved and that is serving God, that is going around preaching to the other gangsters, and he's now actually messing up our thing that we are busy with in prison. And that was what we were also thinking. He's now trying to break the bond that we were building up with blood, with sweat, with tears for many years now.
And the second day I was on the prison, there was a group of guys that they had all their knives out. They were standing right at my back, and they just couldn't stab me.
It was now another ball game. I knew that for me to attack Mario directly will be actually an attack on God himself, man. You see, so I had to be more cunning, yeah, and I had to be more shrewd in this regard to try to just to get him out of the way. And yes, we were planning, like we had different ways that we can't stab him. Now we must go now to another way to do it, to keep the messy stuff away, because why he's not in the gangs, because why the messy stuff comes in to like send the message. You know, now we must try to like poison this guy, you know, but somehow God intervened and our plans was never meant to come to pass.
Taswell was one of those guys that was ready to stab me and to murder me because of the pain that I've caused in their lives in the past. So there were many attempts on my life, and then there were also people that were kind of like afraid. We don't know if we're going to stab him, what's going to happen, how's he going to retaliate, that type of stuff. But I mean, it's all the grace of God. I can't take credit for nothing. That God has divinely protected me while I was in prison, that even the amount of evil that I've done in prison, not one hair on my head was touched. I was never stabbed once. I was beaten up by the cops, but from other gangs, never stabbed once.
All of us, all of the bunch of the guys that was actually in the Muslim and was actually in the month of Ramadan thing in that room, was all of them was in the gangs, you know. And there we went back to the section where gangsterism is now on its peak. Yeah, so we have to, like, we do our prayers with a knife in the hand, and we go down on with the one knee, and with the knife in the other hand we do the prayers, because why now we're in the room where our rivals is also at, but still we must do what we do. And as we do our things, it's behind curtains. They can't see what we do, what we're busy with, or what we are busy with behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, we are still continuing with our stuff, with the elements, the gangsterism stuff, and the ritual stuff of the gangs. And you know, beneath it is still going on. But God had a plan. But not long after that, I see God had the other plan with Mario and with me. Yeah, and after long, Mario was the one to come and share the gospel with me. Yeah, when God got me in his hands.
And so they were planning this sports day. Him and a couple of friends were planning to stab me, and they just couldn't stab me. And then so I went from cell to cell asking them for forgiveness, and I came to Taswell's cell, and he was standing on that side, inside, and I was on the outside. I said, you know, Taswell, all the stuff that happened, and I just want to ask for forgiveness. I'm sorry for whatever happened. And I could see in his eyes, he was looking at me like that. And you know, in prison you can't take anything serious. The guy might say he forgives you, tomorrow he stabs you. So it just nodded his head and stuff like that, and I walked away.
yeah, the Lord was merciful. Yeah, and I see that this was His way of showing Mario to be a true believer and a true son for the gospel and for the kingdom at that time. While it was a time of turmoil, no brothers or no word was actually heard in the prison at that time. Yeah, all the words was like wiped from the table. There was a time like that also in prison, I can remember. No one could come into the prison, no spiritual care worker, no nothing can come in because of the violence, the level of violence that was taking place in our sections. Yeah, and so God was even using this guy, yes, Mario.
I had this hunger and this thirst for God. I want more of Him. I want more of Him. So I would go and, like people go do club hopping, I would go do Bible study hopping. I would go from the one Bible study to the other Bible study just to get in more and more Word of God. But also I had to go to all the gangsters and I asked them for forgiveness for what I've done to them, for how I've recruited them into gangsterism. I've given them false information. Some of them said, no, we receive your forgiveness. Others says, no, this gangsterism is working for us, so you choose your own road. And I had to be at peace with that. But later I started to see the power and the work of God in their lives as God started to use me in the prison now to go and preach at these various cells and preach to these inmates. And for 7 years I preached the gospel while I was in prison.
Yeah, but there was this one day in 2005 with my story. Yeah, the people, and that was actually for me like what got my attention. How did they get here? You see, there's people that came in. It was South Korean people, it was Americans, it was people from England, and it was like, I asked the guy that is with me, like they say, my getuie, I asked the guy, hey, where did these people come from? Or how did they come in? Why are they then so special to get this gate, you know, to come into this prison that is filled with violence at this time, you know, and that is in segregation. Everyone is like in separation. Everyone get their hour alone exercise, their hour alone food. So that day I went, and to my surprise, that was my day that I had an encounter with the Lord with a knife on me. We had knives on us when we go to that church. At that time, the life in prison was like that. I didn't want to go and sit with a knife in church. I didn't want to. But the life in prison was like that. I had to go to visit with a knife in a pen. The pen is in my pocket. You think it's a pen. It's a knife. To that extreme it was in the prison, because I don't know from what side it will come. But yes, to my surprise, that day, there the voice come there to me. At first I feel the tears. These people were sharing their testimonies of how God was saving them. And we had other plans while we were sitting here, but there's a bigger plan that is now intervening. And this message eventually, it maybe got to me, it maybe softened me on the inside, but I could feel the tears. While they were praying, this one lady was praying, but I feel the tears. But I was opening my eyes, where's this? But there's no tears, so I asked myself, something is wrong here, we have to go. I tell this guy here next to me, hey, there's something happening to me, do you experience these tears? Are you also feeling? He said, no. I think to myself, something is happening here. I feel this warmth on the inside of me like a baby.
Later he also started to get involved in Bible studies and stuff like that. And then I just heard, no, Taswell is also saved. And then we started to have this bond, this relationship, encouraging one another. Because obviously now I was a little more mature in the faith and stuff, so I started to encourage him. And then he was moved from my side to the other side of Drakenstein. But we would always recognize each other in terms of that relationship. So we built it on that. And obviously I had he would ask his mom also to come and visit me, because he knew I didn't get any visits from my parents. So because we started now to build this relationship, he would ask his mom, don't you want to come and visit Mario as well? And so that relationship started to grow from people that wanted to kill one another to now becoming brothers and looking out for each other. And we kept that relationship going over the years. Even though he was at another prison, we kept that relationship going. And when I reconciled with Taswell Senior outside, now the connection even became more stronger, because I was still ministering every week in prison, and Taswell Senior was not. So now I'm spending time with his dad outside, and then when I meet him inside of prison, I would encourage him, "Hey, your dad is doing good, he's sending his love," and that type of stuff. So yeah, just made the bond so much stronger.
When my son came to Christ, that made me very proud, because it takes a lot of courage, especially when you come from the number system and you leave that system in order to serve the Lord. It costs a lot of support. A lot of people have done a lot of work going into prisons, ministering to them, keeping them up, carrying them through. And so that was a joy for me. And for all those years, he kept himself, and the Lord kept him.
No one believed me in that prison. They said I was crazy. They said, no, I got prison sickness at this time around because of my sentence. I'm prison sick. This is a thing that happened to the guys inside. He will go to all the faiths in prison. He will have Rastafari, he will have Muslim, he will have Christian, he will have whatever. He will go through all that is the prison sick when it come up. He will go back to number. They said, no, I'm in that state now. They must leave me now like that. I'm in that state. It's now the years that got to me. I said, oh. After 3 years, the guys that is the rival gangs that beat me that day and they stabbed me, they come and take my hand. They say, forgive us. Now we see it's the real Jesus you serve.
So when I was in prison, and I obviously got saved in prison, and my heart was for reconciliation for the people I've hurt, the people that I gave the order and they got shot, and I wanted to reconcile and ask for forgiveness. I've done a lot of restorative justice workshops and programs over the years, and now my heart is for that, but I know it's going to be a tough journey. And I remember coming out of prison, and one of my father's brothers, a pastor in Bontewell, and he phones me and he says, "There's chaos in Bontewell. I just want you to come. We're doing this open air services for a whole week. Every night we're doing services. Don't you want to come and preach for us on the Saturday night?" And I said to him, "Okay, no, it's fine. I will come and I will preach."
At one time we had a 2-week evangelistic campaign in a section called Krifgat, Golden Gate, just next to Bontewell. So we had a powerful time there. I had an open air service in front of a church every night for 2 weeks. Then we were supposed to give testimony. So the second Tuesday of the 2 weeks, I was supposed to give testimony from our church side. And I wanted to give a particular testimony. But the Holy Spirit struggled with me, or rather I struggled with the Holy Spirit, because the Lord said to me, I want you to testify about that shooting. But I didn't want to testify about that shooting, because I said to the Lord, many people already know that testimony. But the Lord prompted me, I want you to give that testimony. On Tuesday evening at the open air, I gave that testimony of how I was shot at, but the bullet just disappeared by the grace of God. When I gave the testimony, I felt there wasn't a lot of value in my testimony. There wasn't a lot of reaction, But I did what the Lord asked me. That's Tuesday evening.
when I came that Saturday evening in this community's open air services, the people were outside standing there. And I looked at this guy, and it's almost like I got the same picture, because there was almost like bodyguards around him, because it was all these ex-gangsters that he led to the Lord that was now standing around the wheelchair. And I looked at him and I immediately recognized that this is Taswell.
I was in the road, standing in the road in my wheelchair. And this pastor pulled up next to me. But I knew that there's a couple of other ex-gangsters that is also going to give their testimony. So this pastor pulls up, and this young man gets out by the passenger seat. And the pastor introduces him to me. And he says to me, he's going to give testimony today. I said, oh, that's great. But then the pastor gets into his car and parks the car inside of the church grounds. And he's standing here by me, and we're now chatting because he introduced himself, I introduced myself. But I don't know who this is.
And I knew in my heart, God said, you must go reconcile to this man. And so I walked up to him. I looked him, I stood right in front of him. I looked him in his eyes. I asked him, do you know me?
I said, no, I don't know who you are. He said, I'm Mario. But Mario doesn't register in my brain at that time. And he then says, I was with Taswell in prison. And then I remembered the newsletters from Drakenstein. I said, oh, you that Mario. But when I spoke to him there, that time, I still didn't know about the other thing. So we're talking, and then suddenly it becomes a little bit quiet and somber. And he says to me, there was times when I stood in front of your house and I wanted to come in, but I just thought maybe I had a message from Taswell. You know, like the guys do. If you go out, go to my father, go tell him this, this, and that. I thought that was the case. But then I could pick up that he's got a burden. And so I said to him, talk to me. And then he asked me, do you remember about 15 years ago when somebody shot at you? I said, of course I remember. Can't forget things like that.
So I said, I'm the guy that came right to your house and shot at you. I just want to come here and ask you today, don't you want to forgive me?
He said to me that 15 years ago, I was sent out to kill you. I was the one that shot at you. He said to me that he was told by his peers, don't come back if the man is not dead. And I got a shock to learn that this is the man whose identity I never knew about.
I see the tears is rolling, and he looks at me. I said, you will never believe. He said, just 2 days before, I was testifying about that day, how some guys came and shot at me, and here you standing right in front of me. And so I asked him for forgiveness, and he says, no, I forgive you.
I forgive you. Because he asked me for forgiveness. I mean, at that time, the Lord had done a lot of work in my life already, you know. So I was open to reconciliation. Just didn't know him at that time. Like I said, I knew the identity of the other one, but never knew it was him. And so we reconciled on that day, and I felt the Lord do something in the atmosphere.
It's like a minute later, I got this phone call, and my phone ringing, and I'm picking up the phone, And it's all my old friends on the other side of the line having a party, and they ask me this question, are you not our brother anymore? And while they're speaking, I'm looking at Taswell and these other ex-gang members standing around me, and I said, no. And I'm actually looking at them and I said, these are my brothers, those that does the will of the Lord with me. And I put the phone down.
And then afterwards he was called up to give testimony. And when he gave testimony, he said to the crowd that after so many years, today is the first day that he had an opportunity to ask for my forgiveness for shooting at me. And the whole crowd just broke down and cried.
And later I went to go preach, and I affirmed the testimony that he gave 2 days earlier. And there was lots of salvations happening, and lots of people coming up for healing and stuff like that.
And God just did something beautiful. So afterwards we became good friends, A couple of times we ministered together with the same particular testimony.
But it was just for me, just that powerful reconciliation that took place at that moment. And after that we became very good friends. I would go fetch him at his house. He would come by at my house, or I would go to him just to go pray for him and encouraging him on his journey, up until today.
I first got connected with Mario through a friend of ours that is now hosting this interview. And she had given him my book on the Father's Cry. And then she actually paid for Mario to come to one of my seminars that I was doing in, I think, Stellenbosch or something.
I had this thing about fathers and sons in my heart that didn't gel well. And because I know there was a time in prison when someone gave me a book of Larry Crabb called The Papa Prayer. And I started first chapter and I started crying because I couldn't address God as Papa or Father or any one of father names connected to God. And I just closed the book and I didn't want to read it because I still had so much pain. And then I said to this lady, okay, it's fine, I will go. So that afternoon, after I've closed down the gallery, I went up and I sat there. And God showed me all my brokenness. And He showed me the prisons, and He said, all the people in prison, that's also broken as you.
He stayed back when I had the altar call. And I felt in my heart, go to him and just hug him.
Then He gave me a hug there, and He ministered to me, and they prayed for me. And then our past just went out of each other again.
And then I was in the Drakensberg prison, and he showed up. I didn't know that Mario was from there. I didn't know he had graduated from that prison. And that's what I call them, graduates, the people that come out of prison. And I said, oh, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I work here as a spiritual care worker or whatever. And I thought, wow. And then I said, I know you from somewhere. He said, yeah. He said, I was just at your seminar a couple weeks ago. And that's how we got connected. And the first time that I met Mario, I was doing this big, it was on a Sunday, I remember, and they had all the juveniles in the center court. So there was 200-300 people in there. And they had the band and everything. And I said, Mario, I said, can you come and share your testimony? Because you know these guys. I'm really fresh at this point dealing with prisons, especially here in South Africa. And Mario came up and shared, but the thing that he shared that really blew me away was his love for the Father. And he shared his testimony, how he came to know God as his Father. And it blew me away. Like very, very few people in prison or in church would talk that language. And I knew at that moment, I felt God said, this is one of the sons I want you to adopt. Because remember, I came here for that reason.
And then so a year later, Here I meet up with Chris again, and he says, no, I need to, he was doing another seminar there, and he says, no, I need to connect with you. And I said, and then he asked me, we went for coffee or whatever, he asked me, God laid on my heart that I must father you, I must be a father to you.
From time to time, the Lord would show me certain people, and he said, this is the one that I want you to adopt as a spiritual son. And that's where we started our walk together. At first, he was a little leery.
And I'm looking at him like this, and I said, you can't be my father. I can't even address God as my father. And so I just said, no, I'll go pray about it. You said God said that to you, that's fine, but I need to go pray about it.
And I told him, I said, well, you pray about it. Because as a spiritual father, I believe it's got to be two ways. There's got to be a witness in his spirit or her spirit, because sons is not male or female. And for an adoption, because to me, it's a lifelong journey. It's not, they can move countries, they can move churches, they can move jobs. But when this is the knowledge God has given me. Everybody does it differently. But when I spiritually adopt somebody, it's for life.
So I went back, months goes past, connect again with Chris, and he said, and oh, what did God say? And at that time I felt now is the right time to start trusting fathers again. I said, I don't trust you yet, but now is the right time to start trusting fathers again. And that's how we started journeying.
Well, Mario and I have a special relationship because Mario, I have many sons. Now I have about 90 of them in 13 different countries. But the thing is with Mario, there's certain sons that actually carry the heart of the Father. Almost like a Paul and Timothy, like almost like a duplicate. And it's got nothing to do with me. It's just the Father teaching them. And Mario has that heart. He really has a heart for people that is genuine.
The heart of the Father is so big. I don't have words to describe it. And every time God starts to reveal a piece of his heart for me, that makes me fall in love with him more and more. I want to follow him. And I sometimes want to say, just want to give me a hug. Give me that. Because I'm looking at Father God, and I sometimes say, I wish I could touch you. I wish I could you could give me a hug. I wish you could be here. And then God showed me later, but I've seen people so that you can touch me, so that you can hug me, and that type of stuff. And when my daddy was laying on his deathbed, he was about to die, I came into the hospital. I said to God, I don't want to be a preacher to him. I don't want to pray for him, nothing. He doesn't know God. I've been praying for him for years, but I just want to be his son. That's all. And so for 8 days while he was in hospital, we had an amazing father and son relationship. We made jokes. He told me stories of his past. And I mean, me and my daddy, I never called him daddy in my entire life. But that past 8 days, I could recognize him, appreciate him, call him and love him as my own father. Because now the father wound has been healed. So now I could look into his eyes and say, yes, man, you know I love you. Irrespective of all your faults and failures, I love you. So yeah, it made such an impact. Other people now looks at me and seeing that I'm a father for them. And because it's out of the overflow of the journey of sonship, that I now can teach other people what it means to be a son and what it means to be a father.
Since we moved back to Canada, I would come to South Africa sometimes 6 times in 1 year. And then I would go into other countries in Africa. But right now we're specifically talking about South Africa. And I was on my way to South Africa, and I was on the airplane, and I was just praying. And the Lord gave me a specific instruction, which he does from time to time. And he says, when you get to South Africa, he said, you must ask Mario. There's a former gang leader that needs prayer, and Mario will know who it is. So I got off the plane, and again, one of the first things I do is I meet up with Mario. We'll usually have breakfast together, and he kind of gives me an update what's happening with the people and so forth. Well, this particular time I looked at Mario and I said, this is what God spoke to me on the airplane, and he would know who that person is. He's a Christian, but he needs prayer, and he used to be a former gang leader. And that was it.
At one time, Mario called me to tell me that he's bringing Chris over to Bonteville because Chris has a preaching appointment at the Assemblies of God Church. And I said, yes, we will be there. And Mario informed me that Chris said there's an ex-gangster that he needs to pray for. And Mario figured it must be me.
About a week later, I'm speaking at a church in Bonteville, and after the service, Mario said, the man that you need to pray for is there. And here I walk up to this man, again, amazing connection, and I walk up to him, and he was in a wheelchair, and he was driving the wheelchair with his chin, like a joystick. So I could tell, obviously, this man's fully paralyzed, but he spoke English fluently. And I told him what happened on the airplane. And so I told him that I wanted to pray for him. And he said, but I know you. I said, I've never met you. And when you meet this man, you'll never forget because of his condition. And so what happened, I said, well, how do you know me? I said, I've never met you. He said, no, somebody gave me your book 2 years ago. I said, who would have given you my book? He said, Rod Maxwell gave me your book. Rod was the first man that I worked with in South Africa to get me my business visa so I could live here. And once the book was printed, I happened to run into Rod at a mall. And I said, oh, by the way, you know, I wrote a book, and he was a believer. And I said, I wrote a book, and I said, I want to give you a few copies. And I said, you just give it to whoever. And I found out after that one of the first people he wanted to give it to was this ex-gang leader, Taswell Sr. And so I thought, wow, this is a kind of a neat connection.
And Chris said, the Lord said, I must pray with you. And I said, okay. And he began to pray over me. And then I asked him if he would pray for my son who is in prison.
So we prayed together, and he said to me, I said, what do you want me to pray for? And he was really burdened as a father, rightfully so. And he said, I have a son who's in prison. Could you please pray for him? And then he asked for a special prayer for his daughter who was battling in that. And I really saw the heart of a father concerned for his son in prison.
But at the time when I put in the request, I did not know that Chris is doing prison ministry at that particular prison. And he just said, yes, I will pray for your son.
And so I prayed for his son, not knowing who he was or where he was or what prison he was in. We didn't even get into details. So now I go back to Canada, didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, there was that day that we got a few boxes of books that we got there from Medium A, if I'm correctly, yes, from Pastor Archie Jeftas. He was our spiritual coordinator at that time, from the time of youth, and he was still walking the path with us even while we're now at the adults. And we got this box of books, and I took me a few of the books, but there was the book with the Father's Heart, Sons Come Home, yeah, by Christian Joseph Brochu. And I took this book and I said, no, I'm going to read it, because at that time we were busy studying also the Word of God. We were in theology colleges. We needed some materials also for our essays and all these things. But I read this book, I pick it up. The moment I picked this book up, it was like I couldn't put it down, because why, there was something in this book and on this book that had me, and I read that big book maybe for a week. I was reading it. I had it here by my bedside. And I hear the voice clearly say to me when I came to the end, because the story is real good, and the content, it was good. It was touching. And I hear the audible voice say to me, write to this man, because you're going to meet with him. And I said, no, man. And am I listening? Am I hearing voices? Am I getting prison sick now again? Or what is now happening to me? But anyway, I heed the voice and the call, and I wrote.
I think it was about 3 months later, I'm back in South Africa. This is a very interesting story. We had done ministry in the West Coast, and my friend was with me, and he forgot his Bible there. And it plays a big part in what I'm about to tell you. So he forgets the Bible in the West Coast, but Truce, our director, was also there. And I called her and I said, Truce, said, Smitty forgot his Bible, can you bring it? So she said, okay. She said, why don't I meet you at the prison gate? Because she was coming in from the West Coast. And she said, I'll bring you his Bible. Somehow she had picked up a letter at the mail, our Sonship mailbox. And so when she meets me at the gate, I was going in with my friend to do ministry, and Mario was with me actually that day, or he met me at the prison. And she came to the gate and she said, here's Smitty's Bible. And she said, oh, by the way, this letter just came in, and I thought, since it comes from this prison, I should give it to you right away. So I took the letter and I put it in my coat pocket, never even looked at the name or anything. So we went and ministered in the juvenile, which I always did, and I had not done the other prisons yet. So after the ministry with the juveniles, I asked Pastor Archie, I said, I have this letter. I said, I would like to meet this guy. And I never opened the letter yet. And he looks at me and he said, this was his words. He says, if you think Mario was a bad number, he says, this guy makes Mario look like a saint. And I went, whoa, what kind of guy is this? And I said, well, I don't care. I want to meet him. I mean, I've gone to some of the worst prisons in the world. And I thought, I don't care. I want to meet him. If he sent me a letter, he must have read my book, because that's where they get the address for our ministry. Anyway, so sure enough, Archie said, yeah, I'll set it up. I'm going to bring you to him. So he goes in, and it's in the other, it's a medium A, I think. And he goes in to look for Taswell. Now, he knows who Taswell is because he had given Taswell my book. I found out later. Anyways, so sure enough, he takes me to, I think they do like furniture, and Taswell was in there working. And I remember he kind of put his head in and he started screaming, Taswell, Taswell, but it doesn't mean anything to me. Now, Mario, it means a lot to him because he knows him, but he doesn't say a word.
And I said no, even to the guys that I write, I send the letter, I said no, maybe this one will also take maybe 2 years to come. I don't know the response, but I know the response will come. But of the time that I had, the ample time on my hand inside, I wrote. It wasn't effective for me to wait for a response. But 2 weeks, to my surprise, there's this big man coming in there by the prison. There by my workstation, I was busy that time at the spray booth. We were spray painters. We were doing a spray varnishing, and yeah, at that time, there by the wood section, wood cabinet makers. And Pastor Archie Jeptas would run this man in front, and he would tell me, where Taswell, where you? You in trouble. You in trouble again. I say, what trouble? What, you bring trouble here to me all the time? I'm here by the workplace. When I see this big, huge man, the white man coming in there. And I said, no, it's not trouble, there's no trouble is coming here. It's the book. It's the author for the book. I immediately knew, yes, the man, but I didn't expect the man to come. I expected a letter, maybe back. But yes, the man is coming now.
So we walk in, I'll never forget, they opened up the door of this big warehouse, and here's this young man coming towards me, and I reach out my hand, and I'm sure I was going to give him a hug like I normally do. And I went to introduce myself, and he said, no, I don't need any introduction. He said, I know you. I said, I've never been to this prison, so I don't know you. And he said, no, but he said, I've been reading your book for 2 weeks. And he said, I even sent you a letter inviting you to come and see me. And I literally pulled the letter out of my pocket, and I said, I didn't even open the letter. The only reason I know I'm here is because your name's on there, and Archie brought me. And it was like a reunion out of heaven. There was an immediate connection with him.
And that day, it was like my heart was like popping out by my chest, because why everything I was writing in that letter, that man never opened the letter. And everything was in the letter. He was talking with me. He was answering me on the letter. He never read it. It's in the letter. I think, yo, this guy never opened the letter. But he's talking all the things that is in the letter. As he's talking, I said, wow, this is God. It's a visitation for me from God. But in the form of a man, God chose this man to reveal his heart. Because at that time I was at a low, very low in my spirituality, in my Christian life. I was having a lot of questions and to God and about my life, and and I think this is God's way that time to send the man of God in for Papa Chris that time. And yeah, I didn't know him that time as a Papa Chris, but yeah, as the time go, I see the heart for this man, just the hug and the love the man of God he brought to me, and the reception and the
And I remember asking him, because he came from the Muslim world, and God has really given me a heart for the Muslims, because the Muslims in their religion, they don't have a father. And being that the ministry God's called me to do is to bring his heart to the orphans, to the fatherless, I know I'm going to be working with a lot of them. And so instead of praying for him, I said, could you please pray for me?
the way I was accepted, even in my orange uniform, I had to pray for these two mighty men, and with Mario also together. Mario is just as mighty as this man is now huge. This thin boy from Pontyville, he used to be very thin, but now he's also like huge guy now. And here I get this opportunity, I must pray for them. I said, no guys, isn't me must pray for you? Isn't you guys supposed to pray for me? I'm in the orange uniform. They said, no. This huge guy, the white guy, yeah, Papa Christian, Brochu, he said, no, you must pray. He said, fulfill your destiny. It's all I can remember that day, that the man was telling me of the book. Fulfill your destiny. This is your purpose. Pray. We must go to that side and minister to Muslim country and whatever, to the Muslim princes and stuff and presidents, and just pray for God to give us that breakthrough that is by your life. And for me it was like a wow moment to go back with that testimony. I was in tears. I was not a lot of words. There was just tears that day.
And I knelt down, and this young man in his orange uniform and a couple of people that were around him started praying for me. And my friend that was with me from America, he said to me after, he said, I have never heard such a deep, intense prayer in my life. And this man pastored for 18 years that was with me. And there was like almost like electricity in the air. You just could feel the presence of God. And we just had fellowship and time together. Then I had to leave.
But to me it was that God ordained moment for me to say there's still hope. There's still hope. That was in the times I wanted to give up. I was on the verge, maybe changing lanes, maybe shifting gear to say, no man, maybe God didn't really call me. Maybe it was just, man, the prison sickness coming to me, you know, these voices, because the prison is full of voices. But when God sent that man, I see the heart of God coming to me on two legs, because that was my prayer. God, send me people I can feel. Send me people I can touch. Don't send me, with all respect to the TD Jakes and to the Creflo Dollars, don't send me people that will go out by the back door, the only priest, and I don't get to take their hand or to get a hug. Send me someone I can feel, someone I can see, whose life I can touch. And that was what God did. Send me a mentor like that, someone to father me. And that was all that was written in that letter. And that letter was never opened. Maybe after a while that letter was opened, but that was God, Him speaking out of that letter without knowing what is in the letter, because that letter was a result of the book that I read. So that was a powerful moment in my life, and I can never forget that.
So Mario watched all this, doesn't say a word. On the way out, we get into the car, and I probably went for lunch, I can't remember, with Mario. And he said, "Do you know who that guy is?" I said, "Well, he told me his name was Taswell." He said, "No, but you don't know who he is, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't have a clue. I hadn't even opened the letter." He says, "Do you remember the man in the wheelchair that you prayed for?" I said, "Yes, of course. I'll never forget. God told me to pray for him." He said, "That's his son." And that's where I was shocked. I mean, it was like a light bulb went off, and I thought, "Lord, what are you doing?" I didn't know that his son was a Christian in prison. He just told me to pray for his son. And because of Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 and 6, it says, "Turning the hearts of the father to the children and the hearts of the children to the father." Anytime that a father asks me to pray for his kids, there's an intense prayer coming up from inside of me, because that's the heart of our Father, to reunite families, to reunite spiritual sons with fathers and vice versa and so forth. And so I was like over the moon, as you would say, to hear this testimony. And that's how I ended up meeting Taswell Jr.
And then afterwards I heard that Chris met Taswell Jr. in prison. And that was something that was also something that man's hands couldn't put together. It's only the Lord that could put a thing like that together. And then afterwards, Mario brought Chris again to my home. We had a chat there while we were when I was still in Cape Town. And our friendship also grew. Every time when Chris left back to go home to Canada and came back again, if he had time, he would pop in, you know, or we would just WhatsApp and so on. So I'm happy for this relationship and what the Lord is doing in His own sovereign way.
So during one of the trips, and I can't remember because, like I said, I would come to that prison a couple times, maybe 3 times, 4 times a year. So Taswell and I continued to build a relationship. I went back to Medium A. Actually, I brought my spiritual father, Dennis, and Dennis was with me with Mario, and we had like the 3 generation of fathers ministering to Taswell's group in Medium A. It was powerful.
Yes, Papa Chris, he did adopt me as a son and become my mentor and my spiritual father. And from there on, it was just like a wow. This man, every time he come look for me. Every year, there's a certain time this man will come. He say he will come, and he come. And for me, it was like, it touched my heart, really. It was a life change, and it was a whole new shift, a mind shift of what I know of the gospel now, and to coming to the Father, Son, the relationship side of the gospel. Because why? We were just on the religious side of the gospel, you know, and now this to me is like crossing over from the religionship to the relationship, and this is now a whole something else, you know. And but to me, this is the model that the kingdom is all about, what Father and what Son portray, and that is what is actually manifested in our life. And for me, that is the wow, you know, and that is what was out of the ordinary. And I can just say thank you, Lord. At least there's someone, there's a mentor and a father that I can, whose hand I can hold, who I can pray together with, I can cry together, I can laugh together. That to me was, thank you, Lord. Now I know. Now I know. You are reality in my life.
And so Taswell told me about his dad. Now I knew who his dad was and the breakup and their relationship and so forth and so on. And I remember praying with Taswell specifically, which I've done multiple times. And I said, Taswell, I want to stand in the gap. And I want to ask you for forgiveness on behalf of your father. And Taswell forgave his dad, and there was a healing that began in his heart. And I said, I pray that the Lord will really reconcile you to your dad, because I knew that they were in contact, but I didn't know how much. It was really a broken relationship between father and son.
It was 17 years that he spent inside. And in that 17 years, I wasn't even able to go on a regular basis because of my wheelchair, because of finances, because of transport. You could go, you went when you could, you know, and that also sometimes brought a strain on the relationship when you're asked to bring something and you're unable to. You say, yes, I'm coming on Saturday. And then the person whom you asked disappoints you. And then when that person disappoints you, you disappoint your son.
And so several months later, I'm in Canada, and Truce, she does all our paperwork and that. She gets a letter from Taswell Jr. again. And she said, Chris, she said, I'm telling you, this letter is powerful. I had her read it. And when I came in to South Africa on my next trip, I read this letter for myself. And there was one part in there that literally blew me away. And this is the way I understood it, and I reread that part. I wish I had the letter with me here. It said in there, I went to the parole board because he was really battling, and I had prayed with him, and Mario had warned me. He said, Chris, he said, when these guys go to parole board and they think they're going to come out, he said, when the parole board tells them they're not, he said, they will take a nosedive. And so he said, you better watch your son Taswell, because he's already had a nosedive last year, which I kind of helped him through. And it's all of a sudden, it's like they lose all hope. It's like, oh, I'm going to be here forever.
Yeah, my sentence was like 42 years, so I had to do 20 years effective, but they came down, remissions and stuff came down also, and where you get maybe like a 6 months off, you know, whenever the terms change of the presidents, we will get like a remission from time to time. So I got maybe that 1 year, I got off years, and I go to parole after 17 years. I go to parole of my sentence. I came 17 into the prison system. After 17 years, I went to the parole. I was at the age of 34. I got there, and there was still no hope that time when I came there. There was still no hope for parole. So I came there knowing, no, I'm not going now. You actually prepare yourself, you know, at least you spare yourself the pain, you know, and the drama of turning the tables upside down, because why, you know, prepared yourself today, the day I'm going to get the date. No, we tell the guys ahead of time, you know, most, it's not today. It's not today. So don't put your hopes up there. It's maybe next year or the year after, because why, for us with the many years, they got this tendency of testing us. They give you a year date. They say, no, come back to us next year this time. Now you must go. You're like, sure, I've been waiting now, whole year, from last year, this time till this time, this year, I've been waiting. Now again, they will tell you, no, go back. go back. So yeah, I went there once. They gave me a year. The second time I go again.
He wrote me, and he said, Chris, he said, pray for me. He said, I'm going back to the parole board. And so I knew this was happening. I even knew the date. Maxine and I were in Canada praying for him.
Taswell Jr. informed me about the parole hearing. And so I said to him, I will be there. It was in a week, and I got somebody to take me to Pau, and my nephew went with me. And I could go into the parole hearing. They were very gracious on that day. And each one had a thing to say, each of the correctional officers. He also had something to say.
This day I just had this conviction to ask forgiveness, you know, for bringing them all here together. Even though I will get a date or I won't get a date, I'm already used to the system now, you know. So it's not going to make any difference now or later. And I asked him, my father, and even all the members there, that they will forgive me, yeah, for my wrongdoings and my misdeeds of the past.
And then one of the correctional officers asked me if I want to say something. And I said, yes, I want to say something. But when I spoke, I didn't address them. They thought that I was going to address them, but I addressed him. And I said, first and foremost, I want to ask him for his forgiveness for the fact that he's sitting in prison today. I know that I never placed a gun in his hands. I never asked him to become an American, never prompted him, never motivated him. But he saw the people that visited me. He also saw the places where I took him. He heard the talk, the language. And so, even though I did not actively, but unconsciously, I actually prepared him for gangsterism, unknowingly. So on that day in the parole hearing, I asked him to forgive me for not being the father that I was supposed to be, but allowing him to hear and see, and which brought him to this place where he was now incarcerated for so many years.
Yeah, that day there was just tears there that day. I just cried there. Uncontrollably, but just tears, and I know, I had to come here to this table today after 17 years just to cry here by this table. It seems now almost like I'm crying to be set free, but it is something else that is happening in the spirit that time. It was like this thing that was being broken between me and my father, that thing that he had, you know, and the impact he had on my life, his life, the ripple effect, you know. Yeah, so it was that day that God chose to break that thing.
And then I addressed the parole hearing just as a father. They were like shocked. I don't think they ever heard that kind of dialogue, a father asking his son for forgiveness, because usually the father would say, but he wanted to be a gangster. He wanted to shoot people, but I didn't go along that line, because I know that I had a big role as a father to play in my son being there.
So Taswell was telling me of his time with his dad and how him and his dad forgave each other. He said, we hugged each other. Well, of course, Taswell did the hugging because his dad can't lift his arms up. But he said it was like heaven came down. And that's how he wrote it in the letter. I'm telling you, I'm reading this letter and I'm just bawling, because I knew, You know, for so many years, God sent me to a new continent, leaving everything from Canada, giving up everything we worked for 22 years of marriage, and to help seeing this happen. Now we're seeing the fruit of our labor. And it was an ex-gang leader with an ex-gang leader, father-son reconciling at the parole board. And I mean, you couldn't have given me $1 million to make me feel better. I would have enjoyed the million, but it was because this is what I live for. And this is why my Father in heaven, our Father, sent me for this reason. And that's how I saw the connection, the Father, the Son, and now Mario. And to see Mario interact with Taswell, then I found out the details of Mario and Taswell, how they were at odds against each other, and the whole story which we heard in the other interviews, that one was sent to kill one and the other one. And I'm just blown away seeing these three ex-gang leaders totally reunited. Mario tells me the story of Taswell Sr. and how he had tried to shoot him. And I'm like, Lord, you're developing a story in front of my eyes that blows me away. I don't even know how, but it's happening right in front of my eyes. And it's all reconciliation of fathers and sons and forgiveness, brothers that used to hate each other and literally wanted to kill each other. And now they're like blood brothers and even stronger. And I'm in the middle of it, and I don't even know what I'm doing there. I'm just loving each one of them with God's love. And from time to time, Mario would take me to Taswell Sr. I would go pray with him at the house and just love on him. Because now I knew his son in prison. And so I continued with Taswell, I think for the next 3 years. But after him and his dad was reconciled, and I believe that this is important for the audience to hear this. When you're reconciled to your father, whether he's dead or not, I'm telling you, something happens in the spirit realm. Every single son and daughter that we've prayed with, and I can tell you it's probably thousands now. They don't all become my children, but I've prayed with them, and I see a transformation happening when they forgive their parents. This is of utmost, almost every single one of my spiritual children, I have prayed with them to reconcile to their parents. And God has done it over and over and over again, including Truce and Niels, our main directors. And I'm telling you, it is beautiful to see.
After that, they told me again, come back next year. So I was already used to that. So I was not in the mood of fighting. Why you guys? Not now, why? I was already prepared. Maybe 2 years, 3 years I will walk there before they will eventually come. Because there was also this thing of victim and offender dialogue, the VOD. You have to do that. You have to undergo that thing.
I must say that the correctional services does powerful work in bringing victim and perpetrator offender together just before parole, just before they discharge as people. They've done powerful work with the VOD program.
A very, very, very important program you have to undergo in prison with the victims of your crimes, with their families, whether you're involved in murder, whether you're involved in a rape charge or whatsoever, or armed robbery, there's always victims, you know. So whatever crimes directly involve people, dead prisoners or dead people or dead inmates, you know, is recommended to do the VOD, you know. And the VOD, it's also a good program because why now you are reconciling with the community, you are reconciling with the victims, you are reconciling with the people directly that you have caused pain, in whose lives you have hurt, in whose hearts you have ripped apart. Now you must do the binding up. Like the scripture say, there's a time now for everything. So that time for VOD is that time for peace. After the war is the time for binding up. That which was broken is the time to build up again, to restore. There's maybe just this mother that want to know. But as we heard, if you come out now, we must look out at the back of our shoulder. And I say, no, mother, that's a lie. Out of the pit of hell, you won't even see me in Bontiville. So why must you look behind? That's the devil that is trying to alarm you, that is trying to put fear in you. So there's just maybe that one question that bring clarity to that mother's heart, or that bring wholeness or completeness by that mother, or that give her that confidence and that courage to walk around. Because when maybe a son was a witness in my case, then there's this thing that the people go around, no, when that guy come out, he's going to deal with. No, there's nothing to be dealt with. God dealt with it all. But to my surprise, in 2 days it took. The people was asking at prison, is all these people coming for you? I said, yes, it's family and friends. They don't know it's actually the people whom I've hurt. It is their relatives. Yeah, it is the accusers and them. Yeah, it is the victims of my crime. And all of them came in. God was so great. Yes, 1 or 2 had still that pain, but the rest of them, they said, we forgive. We forgive, and may you start a good life somewhere away from this life, you know.
After him and his dad reconciled, shortly after, the 3 people that were killed in the accident and the war that Taswell was involved in, the parents of those 3 children came to the prison, and it's some kind of system, the reconciliation or whatever. They said to him, we forgive you for killing our sons. And the freedom that I saw Taswell come into, and I knew at that point, I said, get ready, son. I said, you're coming out. And I told him, I said, when you come out, I said, I'm telling you, I'm going to celebrate with you. And I said, I'm going to take you out for the biggest steak you ever had in your life.
Like Papa Keres in his words always used to tell us that when we graduate, because he saw now this prison as one big college and one big university of life that we were in, that he will take me for this big steak. And I always thought, no man, that is only a story, you know, from where I'm standing and from where I'm going, you know. But then it eventually happened after I've been released, 2018, around about 2018, 2019.
And it happened, I think maybe 4 or 5 months later. He was out of prison. He's living with his dad in Saldana Bay. And I was up in the West Coast ministering. And I said, okay, son, I'm coming. I said, tomorrow is your day. And I came to his dad. I actually stayed with him and his dad at their house, and I saw the healing of a son with a father. And because his dad is in the wheelchair, he was literally serving his father. I was there in the room seeing the son bring the dad a cool drink or water and helping his dad. I think he stayed there for well over a year. Well, at that time, I told Taswell, I said, okay, now we're going to go out. The 2 of us. I said, you pick the place. So he picked this hotel in Saldana Bay, overlooking the bay, gorgeous place. And I said, don't look at the price. I said, I want you to buy the biggest steak.
Yeah, we went for the most biggest steak ever. I can remember it was a sirloin. Sure, I couldn't even really finish because of all the talking, and then there was this big cheesecake even afterwards. Even that, my blood was going sky high because of this cheesecake. But yeah, thanks to God, and that this man just swallow up on his words, man. And for me was wow, this is God, you know, this is God, and that was to me motivation.
And we had about 6 hours of father and son fellowship. And he'll never forget that day, but neither will I. Because the healing that God took place, that did in their lives, is, to me, it's worth telling the story.
And yes, and from there on, our relationship just bloomed, and it went from glory to glory. And I can just thank God that whenever this man was in the country, he would phone me up. Whether I could be in the location, I could be in the suburbs, or I can be in the urban, the rural areas. That guy would say, that ain't a problem for me, I will come. I come fetch you. Whether that guy must drive 5 hours, he will come. And I knew this guy to come. And I said, yo, greater love like this? No, man. I never experienced by the gospel and by the people that I encounter. So it was for me my prayer, my answered prayer from God. And I can just say thank you, Lord, for him in my life and for blessing me with this heart, the father heart. Yeah. And now today, even as a son, still I know how to walk as a father, yeah, for my youngster.
And Taswell ended up getting married. And I remember the one time he called Maxine, and he calls her Mama Maxine. Maxine is a real mother to these guys. It kind of blows me away to see a mother's love. It's I get it from the father, but in the natural, the mothers have that love. And Maxine has it for these guys like Mario. When you talk about Mario and Taswell and the prisons, and it doesn't matter who it is, she just loves them. And so Taswell really got into her heart. And he called her one time, this probably about a year ago. He says, Mama, he says, you know, we talk on WhatsApp or whatever, and he says, I really, really need prayer. I'm newly married. My wife is expecting. I need a job really bad. And so Taswell said, I just need to provide for my family. Now you got to understand, he went into prison when he was around 16, 17. He comes out at 34. He's never really worked a day in his life, and he's trying to find a job. So it's very difficult to find a job, but he is handy. And anyways, so finally he wrote us and he said, I lined up this job. And I write him, you know, maybe weekly or bi-weekly or whatever. And I said, Taswell, I said, just do your very best. I know you've never worked in, you know, where you're working. I said, do your very best. And I said, God will lead you and help you. And that's how Taswell, I found out later, that ended up meeting a guy named Michael.
After many years, sure, I see this guy there by the place I work. I see this guy come, hey, he's big, fat cheeks. But I say, man, I know this guy, man. I take the cheeks away. I take the big body away, because by now we got the old man body. Moses as a father, he's got no the big man body. I see, hey, this is Michael Willow.
When you're new in a company, all faces is looking. Workers are looking at you. Okay, but from a warder background, because I know I was a warder previous, and when I'm in the streets, wherever I am, I'm alert and aware, because, you know, those inmates, they don't forget you. So this chap, the first night at night shift, I see this guy watching me. He's watching me. But he watched me with like grums, you know, serious man. And I think for myself, hey, what's going on here? Why is this guy looking at me?
But for a few days, I leave him. I keep him hanging there. I don't want to reveal. I don't want to say yet, because by this job I only got now recently, and I don't want this message to run here like wildfire. This is the guys to the ex-prisoners, and this is the guy, you know how it is. Even there's only men working there, but they are like girls. They're like girls. If there's people that can take gossiping to another level, it is the men. So I try to keep it on a low. No one of these people know I come from prison. No one of these people know my background. No one, they only know me as the guy in the lab. I'm a quality controller. They only know me, that guy with got a white jacket. But I watched this guy, Michael Willow.
And for a week passed. He passed every night. He won't greet me. He just look at me. And I become now, hey, what's wrong with this guy? The second week, day shift, nothing happened. He just look at me.
I walk past him. I just greet him. Guys, goeie werk aan vanaand weer. Have a nice working evening tonight, or a nice work day, because we work day and night shift. But Michael, he was watching. He told me, I know you, man. I said, no, man, you don't know me. I passed him. I was keeping him there, man, guessing. I was watching, because deep in my heart, I was disappointed a little bit for this guy, who was once this nice warden, a guy that was, he had something to live for, man, a guy that was serving his country. Even us, we were there at the destructive side. I got something from his life. The way he was always neat. He was a disciplined officer. He always in order. He was always having a good figure of speech with the guys. And for us, he was like a type of a role model. But we will never tell you that. We will just keep that in the back of our head. We can't tell you that here. But when I saw him, I was disappointed. What are you doing here, man? What are you doing here? Hard labor. Few bucks. Maybe you got a big family. Maybe this wouldn't even, suffice to the family, to the need that you got. But you are here. But I think no, keep him there. I keep him there for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, and he got a 3-month contract that time.
The third week, on night shift. The Monday, Tuesday goes Wednesday. He greet me, and he reply to his greeting. This is a sign that I know. We as members, this is our sign how we greet when a 26 gang member greet a warder, and that gang member is disciplined. He will greet you like this. Morning, Makosi. And then the member will greet back like this. Morning, inmate. So immediately it kicks in. But I don't reply to it. So he was moving up and down Taswell, and we go for tea break 9 o'clock. And then we go for our second break, that's 1 o'clock for lunch. 1 o'clock. On my way to the canteen, I called him. Listen here. Do you know me? He smiled. I ask you, do you know me, sir? He smiled and he said to me, yeah, Captain Willow. And immediately when he said Captain Willow, now something kicks in. And I asked him, how do you know me? He said, I know you from prison. And I asked, what is your name?
I tell him, brother, I put out my hand to him. He was already by this time watching me with big eyes. All his bright lights was on. He was already on guard. I don't know what were he expecting, what was coming his way, but I showed him once, I showed him the finger. So he said, I know you, man. That's why we say, but I said, no, you don't know me. So I come to him, I said, no, man, Michael Willow. I know you, Captain, man. How are you? He said, who are you? He don't know who am I. He don't know, he can't remember me, because I tell him, I was always there in the back line. I was watching you there from the dark. I watched you from the dark. You guys was in the light, but I watched you there from my corner. Oh, Michael Willow, Oh, Dianas, Adrian, Bruce. All of them, their names, we know it, man, because we study them. We make it our work inside. We study the officer that work with us. That's why his face, I couldn't forget his face. And that guy was in shock when I tell him. He asked me, who are you? I said, no, man, it's Taswell.
And I didn't catch. And I asked him, what's your surname? So now I reply as a member, a warder to him, like, what's your surname? And he said to me, Amon. And I grab him. And I start crying. And he start crying on the floor. People pass by to the staff canteen, and people, heisters are driving by, but I keep him. And I said to him, Taswell, how can it be that you still recognize me? I'm older. I'm 50 years old. I turned 50 years old now. And he said, no, I will never forget you.
And my first thing was, how did you get here? I asked him, how did you manage to? You was in a warden. You were in working so nicely and doing a nice job. And yeah, but I could see also this guy was broken at that time. Specific time in his life, he was like really broken, and he would come every night. He would come to where I'm working. There where I'm working, it's like a quiet space. It's like an office environment in the lab. We can sit, there's chairs, no one can bother you. We can have prayer times, in our tea times and in our lunch time. So then we will have this little prayers and discussions. Then Mike will always open up, and I see now Mike was in a real deep pit at that time in his life and also with his marriage. But he was open to me, and he said, no, it's no secret, you know, because he need my prayer also. And I always kept him. Now my brother, he wanted to give up a lot of times. He wanted to go take the gun even, and he wanted to like become violent. And I told him, no, my brother, you know, man, we used to go in this way. That is not God's answer for you. You are a son of God. Let's see God's way for your life, or for your marriage, or for the situation that you are in. Like,
And from there, our journey started. Last year, I started there September. It was not an easy, my journey was not easy, because I was having issues in my marriage. And just to, God bring Taswell on my way. Not for the fact that I must meet with him and it stays there, but God introduced a new creature, a new man, a new child to me, born again son. And I opened myself to him, and he opened himself to me. And we start talking, and it comes to, he tells me about this man from Canada, his spiritual father. And there's a camp coming down in November, and he want me to meet with this man. He want me to meet, and he was like serious. It's like, Kiki, he pushed me. You must meet with this man. You must meet with this man. And as I am open, I said, yes, I will go. But I share with him what I'm going through. And God raised him up to help me in my journey with my marriage. At work, simple, just to pray with me. When I was angry, when I cry, he will say to me, everything's going to be okay. But I want you to meet with Papa Chris.
We weren't able to come to South Africa again for 2 years, so now I'm coming to South Africa. And I really miss my spiritual sons. So I said to Truce, because she helps us organize things while we're gone and that, I said, Truce, I said, I want to have a Saturday just for the sons. So we have a group chat for all the sons in South Africa. And so I told them, I said, I want you guys to come. I said, we're going to have an open house at the condo, which I thank God for this condo that Isaac has provided for us. So whenever we come to South Africa, I just send them the dates, and I said, I need the place for these dates. And so I have, it's like my home here in South Africa. And so I wrote the sons, and I said, listen, I want to see all of you, as many as can. And I said, we're going to have an open house from noon till about 4 o'clock. And I said, you come whenever you can, because I know people have schedules and whatever.
And yeah, this one day we had a pre-Sonship gathering there in Strand. As I can remember, we were invited to come to the gathering there, and all of the sons and Papa Chris was coming together, and we went. And I told Mike, you want to come along, because I think you will enjoy this environment.
So Taswell writes me, and he said, Chris, he said, I have this man that I really want to bring. My first response was no, because this is for the sons. I want to have time with each one of them. And I think around the city we might have 15 of them. And so there's a lot of time to catch up for 2 years. And I didn't really want him to bring anybody with him. But again, being led by the Spirit, I felt the witness in my heart. God said, let him bring him. I said, okay. I said, bring him. He said, well, actually, I have 2, because the other one's a driver. So next thing you know, then I get another call from another son, Edward. And he said, Chris, he said, I have 2 people that I really want to bring with me. And I'm like, oh, okay. I said yes to Taswell, so yes to you. And then another son says, I have 3 people I just really want them to receive the Father's love from you. So then it's like, okay, I just kind of threw my hands up, and it's like, well, whoever comes, comes kind of thing.
Chris was organizing this Sonship gathering, like the Saturday thing. Like he does it every time he comes, to gather all the sons around. And I went up, and this time my wife says no, she's gonna go with. Usually she don't go with on these gatherings, but this time she says no, she's gonna go with. So now we're there, and obviously I know a lot of these ex-prisoners, and I work with them outside of prison, and they're there, and we're chatting. And so Taswell Jr. phones me. He phones Chris, and he says, Chris, where's the place? So now I'm the one that knows the area the best. So Chris gives the phone to me, and I asked Taswell, where are you? So Taswell Jr. says, no, I'm walking down the road. So I'm walking out of the balcony, and I can see them coming from a distance. And so I asked Taswell, who's with you? And Taswell says, no, it's 2 brothers that works with me, and you will see when he gets here.
As we come to the flat, he phoned Papa. Said, Papa, it's Taswell. I'm down here. How must I drive? Where must I come in? So Papa comes on top of the balcony, and I look up, and I see this white man. Look to him again. Okay. And then this beautiful man comes down. And if I refer beautiful man, I mean out of my heart. Beauty in his heart. Comes down, and he met us at the door. And he, hi, I'm Chris. What's your name? Michael. And your name? Marlon. Nice to meet you guys. And he gives me a hug at the door, but just with the side. Hi guys, welcome, with the side. And I look at him, because I don't know what it is to be hugged by a father. And I'll never have a father in my life. And for the first time, a white man hugged me. it's not used to our culture that we will get hugged by a white man in South Africa, because we live in apartheid, and apartheid teaches us to hate white people and white people us. But here's a different white man hugging me.
So here's Taswell. He brings this guy, Michael and Marlon, and I meet them at the door. And like I do for the most time, I just kind of pulled him in and gave him a hug and invited him into the condo.
So we get to this room. So when I enter this room is filled with people. But what I sense, all these people are smiling. But inside, I'm unhappy because my marriage. And here comes this lady. She was called by Papa Chris, and her name is Maxine. And Papa Chris introduced Maxine to us. This is my wife. And she comes and she hugged us. She hugged me and she hugged Marlon. And then Papa Chris and Taswell have their talks and talks and talks and talks. But I see this guy standing in the kitchen. He looked at me and I look at him, but I didn't know him. And he comes to me and he said to me, "Yeah, Willow." Check, wow.
I immediately knew who he was, but he didn't know who I was, because I obviously got a bit bigger. And I saw this was Chief Willow. He was one of the guys that broke my ribs and broke my nose. And what I told him later, I said, "You were one of the guys that were on my hit list," meaning that I would send friends to take him out, to kill him. And so he came in, so when Taswell says, "Do you know who this is?" And he made a connection, and then he immediately you could see the fear in his eyes, because in his mind, he's thinking, Taswell set him up so that we can either stab him or kill him. And when he looked around the room, there was a lot of other ex-prisoners.
Here's another guy sitting at the table, looking at me. Said, "Yeah, Captain Willow." I said, "Yes." Now I feel a little bit, uncomfortable, because I'm surrounded with ex-convicts. And what goes through my mind, if they attack me here, I have to stand for myself. But they are washed in the blood of the Lamb. And they are renewed in their mind and transformed in their hearts because of Abba Father, that give them a spiritual father like Papa Chris. And they are different as I know them in prison.
And so I said to him, and I just spoke into his life and just shared about the gospel. I says, "No, what happened in the past happened in the past. There's nothing that I have against you, anything."
And I get so emotional, I'm in this dip with my marriage. And Taswell introduced me to Papa Chris and to Mama Maxine and to all the other sons that was there. And we were introduced to them as well. And me and Mario, we talk and we hug each other.
And so obviously now he's nervous, so now he starts sharing stories of the prison that even my wife don't know, and she's standing next to me. And so now he calls me on one of those that old nicknames, and he says, "My broer killer." So he's seen this and that and that, and my wife is looking like this. Who is this guy talking about? And so he started sharing stories and stuff like that, and so that's when we connected. So I could see that he's also at the place where he needs the Lord. And I said to him, you need to come on the camp. Come next week, you need to come on the camp so that we can talk more and pray and stuff. And he says, now I will come. And that's when we first connected. So now he still has to make his way through the room and greet everyone. But he got so stuck in fear that he stood in the same place the whole time because he didn't want to face certain people.
Yeah, from there, Mike even meet from the guys that he used to know back then. Even me, I was in shock to see here's more people, ex-prisoners, that can recall to Mike, Mr. Willow, you know, that can identify with him from back then. And it was to me like, wow, this guy, you know, the right time and in the right place. And little did we know that from this guys that was here, actually, one of the guys, he said, now Neville, here's one of these guys, if I'm correctly, he was also directly involved in an attack on Mr. Willow's life there in Maximum, Polsmore.
So this guy said to me, I'm Neville. And the other guy said, Ackerman. And both of them are ex-convicts. But the guy Neville said to me, I want to use this opportunity. And he started crying by the table to ask you forgiveness, Captain Willow. 25 years ago. Do you see the mark in your face? Do you see the mark under here? Do you remember what happened that morning in the section? When we attack you, I initiate and I give the instruction that they must kill you. Mario and Taswell are 26 and he's at 28. They were enemies. And God bring enemies together to sit under one roof as changed people. And he said, I was the guy who hits you with the papak in your face.
That day, they actually beat Mr. Willow, Michael Willow, up with the buckets. At that time, it is that steel buckets, that iron steel. It's actually a weapon. You can cut open a guy's head, and they got to him here by the eye, and some places there you could sew.
I was the one who hit you. We nearly killed you that morning. It's me, Neville. You still remember me? I said, yes. And he reached out his hand and he said, forgive me. And that day, God brings ex-convicts with a warder, an ex-warder together. A warder that brings so many harm, you know, to them while they were in custody. And we enjoy ourselves there.
Edward, another spiritual son, who's also an ex-offender or whatever. I don't even say that. I tell them that they graduated, so I don't call them ex-offenders. Edward had two guys with him that I never knew from anywhere. And so they sit down at the table. Mario's there and Michael. But I remember there was something about Michael, because at one point in the morning I was praying for all the sons coming, and I was excited. Several of them, actually all of them, I had not seen for about 2 years. And I was excited about seeing our spiritual children. Maxine was there, so she went out and bought all the food and the fixings that she would at home with our own kids. And now we're having our children over for a reunion. And of course, they brought their friends along. And so when I was in prayer that morning, I really felt the Lord said, I want you to bless them as a father and to pray over them. I thought, okay, Lord. So here we are, getting to meet several people, new people, whatever. I don't know what's going on in the room. I don't have a clue who Michael is and how he knew Taswell before, or Mario or Edward and these two other guys with him. I didn't have a clue about that. I'm just doing what Father's telling me to do, and loving on each one of them. We're having fellowship. And then at one point, I think it was right after the meal, I said, I had a vision this morning in prayer, and I want to know who wants me to, and I'm speaking to my sons now. There was probably about 8 of them there, but there was probably 20 people in the room. I said, the sons, I said, if you want me to pray for you to receive a father's blessing, I want you to kneel down. To my amazement, everybody knelt down. And at that point, I could feel the presence of the Father come into the room. It's a special presence. And unless you've experienced it, it's hard to explain it. And Maxine and I went around and started praying over each one. They were kneeling down, some were crying. It was just a time, a moment of God blessing his children. And I remember specifically Michael. I had him stand up and I put his hands up in the air, and he's fairly tall, so he had his hands up in the air, and I started praying and prophesying over him that God was to promote him as a father, not knowing him from Adam. And that was about it. And then they went back and sat down, and we continued the fellowship, and Truce was there by then. And the young man Marlon said, I have to leave, but Michael said, I want to stay longer. And at this time, there was a spiritual connection with him, and of course, Taswell. And so Taswell wanted to stay all day, and he was now with Mama Maxine, as he calls her, and Truce was there. So by then, everybody left, including Mario. And at that point, Michael sat down and he said, I really, really need prayer. And I won't get into the details, that's his testimony. But he started really opening up about his marriage and people that he worked with. And I think it went on for at least 2 hours.
And whole day that guy went on to confess. Even with the mic. The day couldn't stop. The day just went on. I can still remember he was still sitting there with Papa Chris them and the whole team and Mama Maxine and Truce them, and he was just confessing. Everything was like coming out in the air, and I was like, wow, what is happening now? In this, because all of us was thinking we was already due to go back home, and yeah, but at the mic, it's his time now. And to me it was just like a wow moment to see, yeah, this guy is coming out and about. He maybe never got a space like this to just be himself and to open up. Yeah, he can actually feel safe. So it was more like a safe environment for him, and he just released, because who know what could have happened. And he was just like open where he was like in his life. And there Papa Chris then prayed for him, and the tears was also running, and yeah, I could tell something was shifting in his life.
And I called this kind of like a spiritual operation, but he was so ready and vulnerable. And God showed me, I mean, there's a long story, I won't get into it, but about the heart transplant and how God can literally take the heart of stone and give him a heart of flesh. And that's kind of what we were doing. And Truce, being our director, we're also training her and helping her to do this, which she does with a lot of people. And so this went on for about 2-3 hours.
For all these years, I'm a preacher, and I was so misled and abused and misused by so-called religious care workers, pastors, apostles. And they will just use me for the gift that is upon me. But when I met Papa Chris, he tells me, it's not about your gift, but it's about you. It's about you. God is waiting on you. And he take me through the process. He and my Mama Maxine in the condo while they're praying for me. And they ask forgiveness for me on behalf of my previous experience with pastors that mislead me. And I was, wow, this man is asking forgiveness for pastors that use me in. They will use me preaching for them, and after that they kick me out. When they get the money, they get the souls. When they get souls, they get money. And I'm nothing. But God transformed my life. And I received this understanding how important I am and how special I am.
Afterwards, Michael says to me, he says, I want to know where Taswell lives. So he says, could you drop Taswell first, and then you can drop me off on the way back, because he's not too far from where I live. So I said, sure, no problem. I knew God had a plan. And when I dropped off Taswell at his house, I knew, I said, Michael, I said, on the way home, we're going to stop for a coffee. And we pulled in this place, which I had brought many young men from Kailicha to this. It's a place on the highway on the end too. And so we walk in there, and when we walked in there, I felt the Lord said, buy him a milkshake. I said, okay. So I go there, and of course it's not like I need a milkshake, but now I'm going to have a milkshake with Michael. And I'll tell you, you talk about being led by the Spirit. I said, Michael, I'm going to get you a milkshake. And he looks at me and he says, nah. He said, you know, at that time, he thought it was 60. It was 50. But anyways, that's another story. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. Anyways, so he sits there and he says, you know, I'm 50 years old and I have never had a milkshake in my life. And I said, why is that? He says, because I always thought milkshakes were for kids. I said, well, Michael, today you are a kid. I said, God's heart is for you as a son. And it was just amazing how a 40 rand milkshake, a $4 milkshake can change somebody's life. It was like a little child that had his first ice cream cone. And I remembered years ago, a young man I took to McDonald's. He was a pastor of a fairly large church. And God said, buy him an ice cream cone. 26 years old. He said, this is the first ice cream cone I've ever had. And we don't realize sometimes what it means to a person, a hug, a milkshake. And so I spent the next couple hours with Michael, and I knew God was growing something in my heart towards him. And it didn't take too long. Michael said, Chris, I would like to become one of your sons. And I said, Michael, I said, I don't do this quickly. I said, I'd like to take about a year. So I kind of call it an engagement period. And I said, because a lot of times people out of their emotion, which I understand, I'm emotional too. And it's like you just want to fit into this family that you just met. And he met Truce and Maxine and a lot of the sons. And it's like he wants to be part of this family. I said, just pray and take your time. Anyways, so a week later, we're having the men's camp. And Michael said, I'm coming. I'm coming to the camp. So Taswell brings Michael to the camp with Marlon. So now we're driving to camp. It's about 2 hours long to drive there. And I specifically chose to bring those three with me. And I'm telling you, for the next 2 hours of driving along the ocean, and I took the long way there, we had 2 hours that I could tell people it's almost like we flew there. We prayed, we talked together, we prayed, and it was like the Holy Spirit was so in the car with us. So we get to camp, and Michael is so pumped up. And all of a sudden, we have Pumzili, another son that goes on the keyboard. Nothing is prearranged. We just flow by the Spirit. These guys start singing. It sounds like a choir. I mean, these black people can sing. and the colors, I'm telling you. And Michael, no exception. I mean, he starts singing, and he's got this voice that, I mean, could be in one of the top choirs. It's just beautiful. And for the next 2.5 days, it's like he's in heaven, just coming out of himself and singing and dancing and just having fun with all the people in the room.
I was reunited with God. I served God for all these years, but I served God without relationship. I served God without knowing the heart of the Father.
And then something happened, is when I was doing a teaching, and I obviously usually touch on forgiveness, and he's sitting right next to me, and he said, Chris, he said, do you mind if I say something? And so I'm not always sure when people say that, and I don't know them that well, but I thought, yeah, okay, go for it. And Michael says, he looks at Mario, who was there, and Taswell, and he says, Mario and Taswell, can you please forgive me for the way that I mistreated you when you were younger? But I didn't know how deep it went.
Michael stood up and Michael said, I just want to ask you guys, I was referring to me and Taswell Jr., for forgiveness for what I've done and how I've treated you in prison.
And I apologized, and I asked Mario to forgive me for what I did to him when I was giving the instruction to beat him to death.
There was that instances of I don't want to say pain, but that bad memories of this guy wanted me killed. And when we had that reconciliation and we asked for forgiveness, and it was out of a pure heart that we could reconcile and says, no, I'll forgive you. No, there's nothing that we hold on to anymore.
And of course, Mario and Taswell forgave him, and there was kind of like a reunion in the spirit again, and that was it. Well, 2 days later, Mario approaches me, and we're out for breakfast, and we're kind of talking about the camp, and now we're talking about Michael and Taswell and how they knew each other. So I'm getting the pieces to the puzzle and what had happened at the condo, which I didn't even know. And then part of the story is that Edward told me about the 2 guys that he brought. One of them had tried to kill Michael. And I mean, this story is developing like a movie in front of me, and I don't even have a clue. I'm just there loving them, and God is putting all these pieces together.
And I was introduced by Taswell to Papa Chris, and Taswell bring me to Mario, and Mario bring me to Neville. And you know what? We are so united today because we belong to one Father that we call Abba Father. And we submit to our spiritual Father that God allocated to us from heaven, that He must take care and look after us while we are at our journey on earth. Papa Chris, God has changed my mindset, the way I think of what repentance is. God has changed my mindset. It's not about your gift, but it's about to become a son. It's about to be adopted by the Father. So you can have the heart of the Father, that you can have also the heart and the love for your neighbors, for your wife, and for your kids.
When we left that weekend, I heard it was his birthday. And I just thought, okay. I asked him, who's going to celebrate your birthday with you? Because he was a little bit confused, and he says, no, he's turning 60. So in the meantime, he was actually turning 50. So I'm asking, who's celebrating your birthday with you? And he says, there's no one that's celebrating my birthday with me today. I'm just going to stay home.
So now I'm in breakfast with Mario. I think it was on the Tuesday morning. And it was Michael's birthday that day. And I knew that him and his wife, they had problems. And anyway, so Mario said, Chris, I want to give Michael a birthday party. And I said, what? He says, I want to give Michael a birthday party. No, that's nice for two brothers. But just prior to that, he told me who Michael was. That Michael had ordered for Mario to get beat up so bad and to be thrown into this cell that had been burnt 3 weeks before. And the effect was, you live like a dog, you're going to die like a dog. That's Mario's version to me. So I don't know exactly how it went, but that's what Mario told me. And I knew Mario's testimony because we walked together for 8 years. Now I'm meeting the man who ordered for him to get beat up and thrown into this cell. And all of a sudden my head does like I don't know what to call it. And I looked at Mario and I said, you want to give this man a party. And I had just adopted Michael after camp because he asked me. And I wanted to wait, but then there was a prophetic word that came over him that God was speeding him and this and that. And I felt the Lord said, adopt him now. So I did actually on the way home. And then this happens. And he said, I would like to have it at the condo where you're at. I said, well, I have no problem doing it. But I remember looking at Mario at the restaurant. I was at Spur and I looked at him and I said, Mario, I said, you blow me away. I said, I've had enemies in my life, not like you've had. But I said, the pain they have caused to me and my family, I said, I've forgiven them. I have nothing against them. But to throw them a party, I said, I can't believe the love that God has put in your heart. And I had to go pick up Michael because Mario's car was in the shop. And Mario said, just hold him there. Well, he couldn't go anywhere because he didn't have a car. So I was with Michael. We had 2 hours, amazing hours together, praying and fellowshipping and whatever.
Oh, my birthday party was a surprise. You know, I couldn't think because there was now these differences between me and my wife, and I know nothing will come from her side. But actually something come from her side because my ex-convicts, include Papa Chris, they decided just to give me a surprise. And they come pick me up. Papa come pick me up and we went to the condo.
So I told my wife, come, let's go to the shops. And I went to go buy him gifts and cakes and cool drinks and chips. And we had a little party for him there and candles and everything.
And then Mario shows in, comes into the condo. He had 2 cakes, all the fixing, all the food, and he paid this out of his own pocket. And his wife was there. And then he brings
Taswell at Mario. And Mario's wife and Papa were my guest. And they give me this party. It was so emotional for me just to know that God brings enemies together and God can use your enemy to bless you.
And he looked at me and you could see the tears in his eyes. The man that he said to the other officials that they must beat me to death is giving him a party.
And God shows to me He's a God of His word, that He raised up ex-convicts that was my previous enemies, and now they are my brothers in Christ, and we belongs to one Father, and we are sons to Abba Father. so enemies can become your blessing.
And here I have 3 spiritual sons reuniting in the love of the Father in the very condo that God connected us together about 2 weeks before. And I just thought, Lord, you're amazing. In my head, I'm getting 16 years of flash of traveling to many countries and helping people. Never in my wildest dream would I ever thought that a little book would bring me to all these people and connect me together, and to see 3 sons now working together.
And I went home, and later we found out that his marriage was on the rocks, that his wife's bags is already packed. And that's where we started, me and my wife started ministering to him and his wife. And we saw total transformation. About the Michael I reconciled with and I met with just 2 months ago, to where he is now in his life and his marriage. So yeah, this was kind of like the journey and the story between me and Chief Willow as we know him.
But today, I'm happy that God grants me the opportunity while I'm on earth to meet with these ex-convicts and to meet with such a profound, humble man as Papa Chris is. And through my connection with Papa Chris, I'm connected to Mario and Taswell. Mario tapped in with his wife, gave me some visits, sat with me and my wife, didn't talk about the problem, but talk about the solution. And the solution in our teaching as sons is all about love and forgiveness. That is the teaching that we received, is to be free from bondage, is to love Abba Father, and to love your neighbor and your family. And since I received the teaching, and since I was adopted as a son by the grace of God through Papa Chris and through him as Abba Father, I sit here as a son today. God connect me with sons and with brothers and with a father that I can look up. And through my connection with them, you know what? My merits are restored. Because my fellow brother as a son, Mario, intervened, but only with the love of the Father. And that is my story.
2 months later, I find out that Mario has gone back and helped them in their marriage. Mario's mentoring Taswell because he's a new father, a new husband. And Mario's been married, I think, 7, 8, 9 years. His daughter's 7 years old. So he really does carry the heart of the Father. So he's carrying that for his brothers. And to see them in the condo together. By then, Maxine had gone back to Canada. And I just celebrate God's heart in bringing Michael into our lives. And now it's like almost like the cherry on the cake. And that's why we're here today.